This is story of a young girl who was murdered in 1985 and his killer was not arrested until October 2007, 22 years after her murder. In the autumn of 1985, Gina Tenney was a sophomore at Youngstown State University. She lived alone in a second-floor apartment in a converted house on Ohio Avenue in Youngstown. Benny Adams lived in the same house in a downstairs apartment with his girlfriend. The duplex had an interior common staircase. Around 1 a.m. on December 25, 1985, Gina was getting ready for bed when she heard someone at the door with the keys like they were trying to get in. Gina called her ex-boyfriend, Mark Passarello, who came and stayed with her until about 3 a.m. on Christmas morning. Shortly after Passarello left, Gina again heard someone at her door. The person knocked over the chair Gina had placed against the door and entered the apartment. Gina called the police to report an intruder in her apartment. Gina's friend suspected that Adams was the burglar. According to her friend, the outside door to Gina's building made a loud screeching noise when it was opened or closed. But Gina had not heard the door screech the night of the burglary, which suggested to her that the burglar had not come from outside the apartment building. She shared the information about the screeching door with the police, but never explicitly communicated her suspicions about Adams at the time she initially spoke to the police. Less than a week after the break-in, on the morning of December 30, 1985, Gina's body was found floating in the Mahoning River by a muskrat trapper checking his traps in the freezing water. Upon identifying Gina Tenney's body, homicide detectives called Blanchard into the investigation. From the outset, Blanchard considered Adams a person of interest in the homicide. Blanchard and two homicide detectives traveled to the duplex on Ohio Avenue. They knocked on the exterior door for a number of minutes until Adams emerged from his apartment and admitted them into the common area. Upstairs, the police officers found the door to Gina's apartment locked. They observed no blood on the steps. Blanchard saw no new evidence of forced entry. The investigators decided to call the building's owner for the key to Gina's apartment. They then knocked on Adams's apartment door for permission to use his telephone. Adams let them in. Detectives talked to Adams, asking him when he had last seen Gina, whether anything suspicious had been happening lately, whether anybody else was around who might know something, and whether he was alone. Adams indicated that he was alone in the apartment and told detectives that he did not know where Gina might be. Detectives saw a jacket on the floor just outside the door to the bedroom. As Blanchard searched the jacket for weapons, he felt a hard object in the pocket and pulled it out. The object was an ATM card from Dollar Bank bearing the name Gina Tenney. Blanchard testified that he also found a folded Mahoning County welfare card in the name of Benny Adams in the pocket. The police officers immediately arrested Adams. When they searched him, they found a blue tissue in his pants pocket with 2 cigarette butts wrapped up in it. In a bathroom waste paper basket, police officers found a ring of 10 keys with the letter G on the keychain. One of the keys fit Gina Tenney's apartment door and another key fit her automobile. In the kitchen, Blanchard found a pot holder with hair and dirt on it in a wastebasket. Police officers later found a matching pot holder atop the refrigerator in Gina's apartment. Police officers also found an unplugged television on a bed in Adams's apartment. The serial number on the television matched the number on an empty television box later discovered in Gina's apartment. A wall unit in Gina's apartment contained an empty space for a television, and a cable television line dangled in the space. In Gina's apartment, Blanchard saw no broken glass, broken furniture, or other indication that the home had been ransacked. A plate of food and a beer bottle were on the kitchen table. Gina's friends told police investigators that Adams had been bothering Gina for some time before her death. Gina's friends testified that when they visited Gina, Adams often stood in his doorway watching them or peeked out through the curtains. According to her friends, Adams started calling Gina late at night, asking her to invite him up to her apartment. The calls continued even after Gina asked him to stop, and she eventually changed her telephone number. According to her friends, after the Christmas break-in, Gina's emotional state changed from frustration with Adams to fear of him. For the next few nights, she asked a friend to stay over because she was afraid to be alone. Gina specifically had said that she was afraid of Adams. Adams's former parole officer, William Soccorsi, testified that he interviewed Adams twice after his 1985 arrest. The first time they spoke, on December 30, 1985, Adams denied committing any crime and denied having any knowledge that any crime had been committed. On January 2, 1986, detectives asked Adams about the ATM card. Adams admitted that the jacket in which the card was found belonged to him. Detective notes included a statement by Adams to the effect that he found the ATM card outside his building on the front step at around 11:30 a.m. on December 30, 1985. Adams told detectives that he rang Gina's doorbell to return the card, but she was not home, so he put the card in his jacket pocket, intending to return it at some later time. On December 31, 1985, an autopsy of Gina's body was performed. There were different marks found on her body and her ankle was broken after she died. Doctors concluded that the cause of death was asphyxiation and ruled the death a homicide. Doctors ruled out drowning as a cause of death based on the absence of a foam cone around Gina's mouth. Police officers kept Adams in custody because he was a suspect in a rape that had occurred in nearby Boardman, Ohio. In November 1986, Adams was convicted in Mahoning County Common Pleas Court of kidnapping, rape, and aggravated robbery in that case. He served almost 18 years in prison, and he was released on parole on April 21, 2004. With the improvements in crime science, the Ohio Attorney General's office began a program allowing law enforcement agencies to resubmit cold cases for DNA testing. The detectives from Gina's murder had kept tabs on Adams over the years and jumped at the opportunity to check on his possible involvement in the case. In 2007, more than 20 years after Gina's death, the Ohio Attorney General invited police departments to submit cold case evidence to the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Identification and Investigation Laboratory for DNA testing. The Youngstown Police Department submitted evidence from the Gina Tenney case. The police department submitted Gina's belongings for DNA testing and submitted a fresh DNA sample. The department forwarded samples from 1986 that were still on file. Police officers also took a fresh DNA sample from Adams and submitted that, and based on the DNA analysis, Adams was believed to be the murderer. Benny Adams was sentenced to death for the 1985 kidnapping, rape and strangulation death of Gina Tenney. Adams was not arrested until October 2007, 22 years after Gina's murder. Gina's father Lucian said, "I'll never forget that day. We had to sit there in the coroner's office until midnight. She had been out of the water since early morning, but they had to warm her up. When we saw her, she was pretty as a picture, like she was asleep." Gina's mother Avalon had last spoken with her daughter at 6:30 p.m. on December 29. Gina had told them she was on the way to meet a friend. After Adams was convicted in October 2008, Gina's sister Gliva said, "I always wanted a brother or sister, so when Gina was born, I was thrilled. I will always miss her. There's not a day that goes by I don't think of her. And I want everyone to know what a wonderful person Gina was. She was vivacious, bubbly, the most loving, gracious, giving, caring person, and I will miss her until the day I die." The detectives who investigated the case were happy to finally find justice for Gina's family. "It's a day that we've thought about for many years. We've never lost sight of who Gina Tenney is and who Gina Tenney could have been. We reflect today that she would have been 42 years old today, said, Chief of Detectives. As we remember Gina, this will be something that we can fall back on. Gina's father Lucian said of the verdict. We visit her grave just about every day. And a lot of people say that's odd. But it's a place to go and reflect on our life and on Gina's life, and we loved her very much, he said, adding that she worked and studied hard. We know she's at home now. She was and deserved to be happy today, he added.